Hello everyone, welcome back to another video, and in this video we're going to be checking out Shoe0nhead's Why Men Are Moving to the Right, otherwise the man problem. She's had some interesting takes in the past, and I'm a little late on this one, I get that, so we'll get right into it. Those that ain't subscribed, please do so if you enjoy the content, as it helps a lot. So without further ado, let's get into it. The man problem.
Hello everyone, and happy 1-year anniversary to my male loneliness epidemic.
It's crazy
video.
that was that long
I'm happy
ago.
to announce that since that video uploaded, the discourse has greatly improved. People all around the world are taking men's issues more seriously, and the gender war has finally come to an end. Just kidding, everything has gotten worse and nobody has learned anything. From the witches on The View cackling about how men are useless.
Do we need men?
Men are useless.
To women online saying they'd rather be stranded in the woods with a bear than a man.
Would you rather be stuck in a forest with a man or a bear?
The bear. Bear. It seems that things have gotten more toxic than ever, and the gender divide couldn't be any wider, especially politically.
In 2008, 58% of young people leaned Democratic. 2012, 53%. And in the last two major election years, that percentage held steady at 55%. But in 2023, that number dipped below 50% for the first time since 2005. And you'll notice right here, they've started to lean more Republican. And that's partly because of one specific.
It makes sense. I don't think it's going to do a good job of explaining why, but majority of women attend college education far more often than men do. So there's that attendance there. Obviously, with the age group of 18 to 29, if you're going to stay through a college tenure, you're typically going to be in it for a long run. Obviously not that long, but it explains a lot. And obviously you do have the hypothesis that the longer you're in school, the more you're indoctrinated. Say with that what you will. But then there's also the concept of likely personality associated with politics. And essentially what that means is if you're more agreeable, you're typically going to lean more left wing. And then if you're conscientious, you're typically going to lean more right wing. Who's more agreeable? Women on average. Who is more conscientious? Men. So it honestly makes sense. And then in addition to that, men are staying in college less than they previously did. Obviously, there's several reasons for that, and we'll probably get into it a little bit.
Group. Young men.
Okay, I know I said I was going to focus on the gender war and not talk about politics for a while. However, I found a loophole. Politics is talking about gender war. With this election being hailed by the media as the man
To be fair, it's not something I like to get into either.
versus woman election. According to any and all data coming out recently, men all around the world have shifted more right, and women have shifted more left. But women going more left was not the focus of this month's outrage. The outrage, of course, was about men. That's right, we got our yearly, oh no, what is happening to men? Why are they moving to the right freak out? But unlike last year, this freak out isn't solely happening on the internet, no. It's also happening in Washington, D.C.
There are only 46 days until Election Day, and the Harris-Walz campaign is struggling to appeal to a group of voters that could determine the outcome of the election, and that is men.
The Harris campaign is making an aggressive last-minute effort to win over younger male voters.
Am I really gonna make a video criticizing the Democrat Party days before the election? Of course I am. Now, before you celebrate or grab your pitchforks, this is not a pro-Trump video. This is a do-better video. This
I wonder if this is going to age well considering how the election turned out.
is a mommy's not mad, she's disappointed video. Actually, I lied. Mommy's pretty mad. In this video, I am going to be addressing the Democrats' so-called man problem, the recent discourse about men moving right, the last-minute pandering the Democratic Party is doing to get them back, what they could be doing instead, and of course, going over some terrible opinions. Not my opinions. I have never had a bad opinion in my life. Except that one opinion. We don't talk about that one opinion. In a world where it seems like everything men do and like is toxic, from eating meat to working out to even having a beard. Oh wait, that reminds me. Before we get into this video, let's quickly give a shout out to today's video sponsor, Henson Shaving. If you are a regular
watched the ad,
viewer
so you
to
don't
the
have to.
Shoe0nhead channel, First of all, I'm sorry. But also, you know by now, I have been documenting the internet and society in general's growing and widely accepted hatred of men. This has been happening for a very long time. And if you dare spoke up about it, you were called an incel or a pick-me, depending on your gender. But seemingly, almost out of nowhere, there has been a change of heart.
You know, I think men are in crisis, actually, in this country.
Is that a question?
I think that plays out different ways, but I think we need to have a real conversation about that.
Wow, that's interesting. Mainstream media talking about this? I wonder why they care so much now. Democrats fear Harris losing too many male voters to Trump. Oh. Signs have been mounting that, for the first time in recent decades, Democrats may lose majority support from young men in 2024. The risk to Democrats is that this is not just a one-time fluke, but an indication of growing trouble with men in coming elections. Democrats can celebrate the support they are getting from young women, but they also need to take the disaffection of young men seriously, engage them directly, and respond to the visions of manhood and masculinity that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are offering.
You made your bed. You decided who you wanted to focus on, and that's what you chose. So naturally, you're going to have a narrative around your side of politics that is not conducive to a man wanting to join. And I don't think that it was necessarily men going towards something else. I think it was being driven away is really the term we want to use here.
Alright, Kamala, you got 2 weeks to reverse anti-male propaganda and resentment fueled by our government, media, and institutions. How you gonna do it? Harris campaign creating space for white dudes. Oh, that's a great idea. I mean, a little too late, but I'm glad you're finally doing to be honest about role in history. Oh. It's always a space for white men to talk about how much they suck.
What made you start this group, White Dudes for Harris? And I suspect some of it has to do with the polling.
Yeah, for far too long, the left has essentially ceded white men to the MAGA right. There's large parts of the left who have gone out of their way to alienate white men over the last couple of years. And that's understandable in many ways. We decided that we wanted to create space for white men to be a part of electing Vice President Harris.
At the top of the call.
When you create a community or a group on the basis of inherent guilt, you're never going to have the confidence necessary to do anything with it, considering the barrier for entry. I don't think that's an organization that anyone wants to be a part of. Here's this space that we can all belong into, and then within this space, we get to be submissive together. Is that the pitch? I mean, naturally, that's not what's being used because that's too insulting to your ego. So we use better words. We use more socially appropriate terms, but that's what we're accepting nonetheless. Why would that ever work? And I feel a sense of sympathy for those that are in that environment where you feel you're capped off by your demographic data. I don't know.
White Dudes for Harris organizer Ross Morales Roquito said he wanted to address what he called the elephant in the room, criticism surrounding an event organized for white men given the country's history of racism. A lot of people felt uncomfortable about the call, he said. Throughout American history, when white men organized, it was often with pointy hats on. They can't even have their gay little Zoom call where they circle jerk about hating themselves without their own movement going, yikes! A bunch of white males in one space? Seems kind of like the KKK.
It's never enough.
Black people can have their little groups and that's fine, but if a bunch of white people get together, well, that's just called breadtube.
Or racism.
Never mind. White Dudes for Harris. I mean, she's doing pretty bad with Latinos, too. What's next? Hombres con Harris? Oh. So basically, men are leaving the Democratic Party in droves, and it's not looking too good for the Democrats. So it wasn't long until everyone's favorite discourse hit Twitter again. If Kamala loses, which is very possible, there needs to be a real discussion about how Democrats speak to and reach young men. If Kamala loses. If she wins, there doesn't have to be discussion. We shouldn't change anything. Clearly, we're doing everything right. To be clear, I'm not saying we need to worry about women less or change any position.
Obviously, that's not going to age well considering who won, but stuff like this has been happening all the time where people put out the notion like, hey, we should do this thing to show how much we care. There's no follow through. And as I previously mentioned, the barrier for entry is submissiveness and basically self-loathing and guilt. Why would anyone with a sense of maturity want to join an organization of such variables under that condition? The follow through is important. You have to have a sense of consistency amongst not only the giver of information, but amongst the receivers. People have to want to pursue exactly what's going on, in addition to the person that is giving this path or laying out concepts of a path to be as consistent as well. And typically, when people are just doing things for the sake of an outcome, obviously a very shallow outcome, like something like the vote, it's going to run dry because there's no intrinsic motivation to continue that concept. And so essentially, you're just going to fake the funk until people figure you out. Doesn't pan well.
I'm saying the polling.
Let me go back to signifying the importance of women only before I go back to talking about, it's just like, it's so apologetic. And why can't we just take stances and be confident in our stances without the need of pandering everyone else first? It's like you go into a classroom and you pat everyone's head and it's like, hey, you suck. And we're going to figure that out. And then going back to pandering, but no one else. Okay. I swear. It's just like, dude, damn, I don't know. I feel like it's just being in like a preschool classroom. We just gotta grow up.
Around young men is concerning, and if it turns out to be true, we need to have a discussion about how condescending we are coming off to a huge part of the electorate. To be clear,
It's not coming off. You are being condescending.
Not saying we have to change anything. I'm just wondering why men aren't voting for us. What? I am gonna regret posting this so hard. And oh boy did he. The replies were insane, to say the least. I must admit, I cringed reading most of this. I feel that one thing you didn't address is the systemic entitlement bestowed upon white men in the US. That sense of entitlement, that privilege they've felt for eternity, is eroding. Systemic entitlement they have felt for eternity? They're like 22 years old! The f*** do you mean eternity? Who is this, like, 200-year-old man? So, young...
I mean, it's those people that think that there's some kind of leverage between the have and have-nots, not realizing that there's first-generation immigrants that completely prove them wrong. You got people coming over from Nigeria every day making a living off the sweat of their brow. What is your reason for not accomplishing anything in the world? You haven't done shit because you're lazy, so get out and do something. Don't try to blame the systems when you have rich Nigerian men walking the streets. Don't give me that.
Men are snowflakes with hurt fifis because they're not the center of attention anymore. Got it. So are they poor little snowflakes, boo-hoo, or are they scary fascists that are gonna turn America into the Handmaid's Tale? Because they can't be both. You either care about the future, or you don't. You cannot simultaneously hand wave away men moving to fascism, but also fearmonger about it. Hi, man here. Maybe men just need to stop being absolute pieces of dog shit. It seems like the easiest thing to do, right? I don't feel alienated or uncomfortable with democratic messaging because I'm not a complete wannabe fascist cheese dick incel loser who thinks he's the good guy. Reddit and its consequences have been a disaster for the male race. They just need to get off their asses, stop playing video games, and get real jobs. First of all, what real jobs? These guys are coming out of college with useless diplomas and there are no jobs. Also, what an out-of-touch boomer-ass take. Get off your ass and stop playing those video games from the generation who watches TV 24/7. I don't want to hear it. Tell them to get therapy.
Wasn't that dude like on Reddit anyways? Damn.
Tell them whatever you told or gave to women in the 1950s. They made this bed, let them sleep alone.
The hypocrisy of
any other group of people and it's, oh, boo-hoo, poor baby. Let me rewire all of society so your feelings aren't hurt. And then with men, it's get therapy. Be f***ing better. While there is truth in messaging needs to be better from Democrats as a whole, I reject that telling young men they need to be better is the problem. They are trash in their nature, and if they can't do the work to not be toxic waste of seed, that's on them. Vote for my team, by the way. We may not want to hear it, but this is what the data reflects. There is a massive loneliness epidemic in this country which is disproportionately affecting men. Instead of calling them incels or mocking them, we should be willing to hear out their concerns. Wow, a surprisingly good tweet in a sea of bullshit. That's nice to see. I could be wrong, but I'm assuming you're a straight white man, so...
It's men in general. There's no discrimination against the male loneliness epidemic. It's all men. In reference to, obviously, as a demographic, you have several different various examples of different kinds of men going through similar experiences. People that shifted towards the racism post are just, I feel like we kind of know how these people are at this point.
Oh, yeah, go do something.
Like one trick ponies. Let me insult someone based on something that I can see to make myself feel better. And it's like that bully that never grew up.
About it. Why are you guys bothering the rest of us with this? I can't figure it out. Because I would like for Democrats to win the election. Why do you care about men suffering? Because I want to win the election. Amazing. This is the issue right here. Start seeing men as people and not numbers in polls. That is step one. You can't even do step one. Anyway, there were thousands of these kind of tweets in response to this guy. You get it. We've seen it all before. If I went through all of them, this video would be 3 hours long. White dudes for Harris wasn't the only strange attempt the Democrats threw out at the last second to get the male vote.
Hey, white dudes. So, I think we're all pretty sick of hearing how much we suck. Every time you go online, it's the same story. We're the problem. And yeah, some white dudes are. Trump and all his MAGA buddies are out there making it worse.
Are you f***ing kidding me? Years of these people saying men suck and are the problem, and now they're like, hey fellow men, are you sick of being told you suck and are the problem? The audacity! Apparently, Kamala Harris has a secret weapon to win over male voters.
Kamala Harris is turning to her running mate, Tim Walz, hoping he is the secret weapon who can chip away at Donald Trump's support from men.
Much like how Trump chose Pence to win over the more establishment Republican voters, Kamala seems to have chosen Tim Walz to try and win over the white male vote. And boy are they trying. Now I don't hate Tim Walz, in fact I was pleasantly surprised when they chose him over Josh Shapiro. I like a lot of his policies, like his universal school lunch policy. That's an amazing policy, you'd have to be an insane freak to disagree with that. Or a libertarian. But I repeat myself. And there were a few times where he was speaking where I completely forgot he was running to be Kamala's VP and not president himself. And he actually brought a lot of energy to the Democratic stage for once. So what the f was this? Putting out a bunch of ads of Tim Walz changing the air filter in a car, clumsily shooting a gun, and drawing a political football play-by-play. Trotting out Walz like some kind of minstrel show of a white man. Like a man dressing up like a man for Halloween. You don't gotta do all this, bro, I promise you.
Well, I think some of the downside, too, is like how he had that narrative from his family basically turning their back on him because of his either political choices or his life choices. And in addition to his service in the military, it wasn't anything to be proud about. He essentially admitted stolen valor by claiming rank that he never got because he dodged the deployment that was necessary for him to secure that rank upon his exit so he could do politics. Yeah.
And they don't shy
But that's not something that's very commonly spoke about, it seems.
away about how that's exactly what they are trying to do. Tim Walz is clearly a Midwest man's man, but he's the antidote to...
And with concepts of bravado and stolen valor being kind of thrown into the mix, the idea that he's a man's man for the sake of the poster child is just because he's a man in general. I feel like that's what they got, so that's what they're working with. It's not a good look.
Toxic MAGA masculinity. Despite his typically masculine resume as a Midwestern football coach and veteran, Walz is utilizing those qualities to push forward a more progressive, compassion-based form of masculinity. Part of being a vice president is understanding that you are just that, someone who is there to aid and support the president. Walz simply being there on the ticket with a woman and taking a back seat to his running mate, Vice President Kamala Harris, is him embracing his leadership role in a positive, masculine way. Football coach and cheerleader, how Tim Walz is defining masculinity. Amy Deal, a sexism researcher and author of the 2023 book Glass Walls, told USA Today that
if you ever want to look at bad literature on average that covers masculinity, look at women that cover masculinity. I've honestly been looking for things that prove me wrong in this, but it's always, anytime masculinity is a topic, it's never unleashing its full potential. And it's always, how do we define an acceptable form of masculinity so that way we can still control what its outcomes are? That's not how potential works. Potential should be exponential and driven towards a certain direction with a sense of purpose. Putting a cap on something because it's easier to control doesn't make you benevolent. It makes you a monster. And the fact that you approach all concepts of masculinity in that way, why are we using that? It's the same reason why we don't adhere to male professionals on concepts of feminism, right? We typically hear the woman's perspective a lot of the time in reference to feminism and how women's daily lives or fulfillment can be reached.
Men like Walls, who are intentional about rejecting traits and beliefs commonly dubbed as toxic masculinity, are the tonic to harmful stigma associated with expectations of men and boys. He shows you can be masculine, but also not threatened by women as equals, or women who are in positions of power. In fact, you can be cheerleaders for them. Notice the common theme here. Taking a back seat. Cheerleading. Like 5 different articles I read specifically use this word cheerleading. Even a few about Kamala Harris's husband, Doug. God knows we need an antidote for all the lousy men in the news, and I think I found one. A lovable goofball who is happy to cheerlead for his wife, the Vice President of the US. Thank God for Doug Emhoff. Successful guys can support their wives and be respected. You don't have to be the quarterback to play the game at an elite level. Emhoff and his breed of dudes who are giving it their best shot may never be as come hither to lost young men as the militant Andrew Tate models of manhood, but they are out there, and, not unlike good husbands, will appear when they are needed. From the outside looking in, the right promises young men a return to the good times, of the glorious past. You know, the one your grandfather had. The Coca-Cola ad rose-tinted version of the past. Back when you can afford a house and support a family on one income. While the left, which historically, in my opinion, had the policies to make...
I mean, there is an often sell point on the right of influencing the outcome of more nuclear families again, simply because that led to better communities, because good families equal good communities. That's, if you're contributing with altruistic character, naturally that's going to be the outcome. However, the agenda behind it obviously means flooding in more tax, Social Security, and various outcomes of the financial grinder of society. And we can kind of see that a little bit too. It's been a constant theme.
That happen are instead trying to sell men a vision of the future. And well, the future is female. A future where you're no longer playing the game, men. You're on the sidelines being a cheerleader. Doesn't that just sound so exciting? Like, what the hell is going on inside these DNC consultant meetings? I really gotta know. Does anyone have any ideas on how to appeal to young men? And please, for the love of God, do not say we have to offer them anything or change in any way. I got it. What? Camo hats. We did that. A vasectomy bus. We did that. Have you perhaps tried nagging them? Yes, we've been doing that. Say, you know that whole male loneliness epidemic thing? Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Oh yeah.
A really nice place. Have you been here before?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite spots. I bring everybody here. I said not go on a lot of dates, but...
Hey men, if you don't vote for Kamala Harris, women won't fuck you. Brilliant. Young men should know that if you vote for Trump, you're basically never going to get laid. I mean, is it incorrect? Don't think so. Trump gives girls the ick. Vote Harris, get laid.
I think the latest information is that women seeking relationships often naturally end up with conservative men. American culture.
They are not beating the...
So that's kind of...
pretending to be progressive to get laid allegations with this one. Literally just endorsing woke fishing. When men pretend to be more progressive on dating apps to get laid. Do not do this, by the way. Be open and honest about your opinions. And no, you cannot fix them. Also, pretty weird and like low-key sexist to imply like women are some prize for voting the correct way. Hey, and if all else fails, go after the Gooner vote.
Oh! Sorry, you can't do that.
What the hell, man? How'd you get in here?
I'm your Republican congressman. Now that we're in charge, we're banning porn nationwide.
I'm sorry. I love this ad. The one time they speak to men directly, and it's, hey men.
Oh man, that caught me off guard.
The Republicans are gonna take away one of the only vices you use to numb the pain. So vote for us. Bleak. Just the absolute state of the world right now. Also, was that Germa? Believe it or not, this wasn't the worst of it.
I'm a man.
I'm a man.
I'm a man, man.
And I'm man enough.
I'm man enough to enjoy a barrel-proof bourbon.
Neat.
Man enough to cook my steak rare.
You think I'm afraid to rebuild a carburetor? I eat carburetors for breakfast.
I'll tell you another thing I sure as shit am not afraid of. Women.
When I first saw this, I thought it was a parody created by Republicans to make
Didn't these all come out to be paid actors also?
fun of how hard the Democratic Party is trying to pander to men to get their vote. But alas.
I love women.
I love women who support their families.
I think I remember.
Women who decide not to have families.
Women who take charge.
And I'm man enough to help them win.
Everything from them directed towards men
Just
has to have
anything.
this tone of irony or self-deprecation. They can't even do it sincerely. But apparently, white men aren't the only demographic Kamala is struggling with.
This is the Democratic margin among black men under the age of 45 in presidential elections. You go back to November of 2012, what do you see? You see Obama by 81. Clinton only won him by 63. Then we're all the way down to Biden last time around by 53. A tremendous drop already. And then you take a look at the average of the most recent polls, and Kamala Harris is up by only 41 points.
Democrats deployed their ultimate weapon, Barack Obama. At a campaign stump for Harris on Thursday in Pittsburgh, Obama said that despite Harris raising upward of $1 billion, we have yet to see the same kinds of energy and turnout in all quarters of our neighborhoods and communities as we saw when I was running. That lag in energy, he added, appears, quote, to be more pronounced with the brothers. You're coming up with all kinds of reasons and excuses. I've got a problem with that, he said, because part of it makes me think, and I'm speaking to men directly, part of it makes me think that, well, you just aren't feeling the idea of having a woman for president, and you're coming up with
And so let me adhere to people's guilt and let me wave this finger in their face again to try to get them to change their mind. I feel.
with other alternatives and other reasons for that. Once again, their only tactic seems to be getting in a man's face and going, tisk tisk bad boy. Like a dog that just peed on the carpet. It's not 2014 anymore, Barack. Nobody cares about sexism, motherfucker. We can't afford groceries. What's crazy is, as far as I know, Kamala herself has never played the woman card. She has never played the sexism card. In fact, she actively pushes against it.
You've been reluctant to lean into, to talk about the historic nature of your candidacy on the campaign trail. Why is that?
Well, I'm clearly a woman. I don't need to point that out to anyone. The point that most people really care about.
I think that would have kind of been a bad move, honestly, because then you're just throwing a concept in people's faces. I feel like that's not really, I mean, people ain't that stupid. You know, I think that they already know. But in reference to idolizing her childhood, she would only really speak about her mother all the time. She had a father, and her father had his own success in various forms like that. Obviously, the outcome of their family had its end, but I mean, that could be an example of such. I think that strictly only speaking on one parent over the other is kind of leaning towards the rhetoric of one thing over the other. You're favoring something, and I think that favoring things has a lot to do with subtle displays of sexism. Otherwise, you'd be more prominent with speaking with the entirety and not tailoring your narrative towards one thing over the other. And the more you realize that you are tailoring towards one thing over the other, that is your agenda. And I think that that's what kind of fell short with her deliveries, and that's why she didn't do very well in discussions, is because it was very obvious. And a lot of things were very broad. I think that a lot of people saw that in various forms of interviews and conferences, stuff like that.
Is, can you do the job? And do you have a plan to actually focus on them?
I was proud. It's like they finally learned from Hillary Clinton's failure. But that didn't stop the media or Barack Obama from doing it for her. Thanks, Obama. For all the Zoomers, thanks, Obama was a meme in like 2008. Yeah. It was funny back then. That would have slapped. While I was writing this video, Kamala and Gretchen Whitmer were getting ready to film a video at a bar together when Kamala was apparently caught on hot mic saying this.
Yeah. Oh, we have microphones and listening to everything. Oh, I didn't realize that. Okay. Yeah. So, well,
You'll
now you
bleep
tell
my
us.
F words.
We just told all the family secrets. Shit.
We need to move ground with men, so what we're gonna do is pretend to drink beer at a bar. Men like beer, right?
Cheers.
Just talk about policy. Just be yourself. Just listen to men and what they want. Kamala, all you gotta do is talk. Actually, no, now that I think about it, that might make it worse. Put Tim Walz out there, okay? Let Tim Walz do the talking. Don't dress him up as a man. You wanna know how to speak to men? go to where they are. A good place to speak to young men is the Joe Rogan podcast, which Kamala hinted at going on, but then that never happened, and instead Trump went on, and that episode hit like 20 million views in a day. But like,
that shit was crazy.
Can you blame her? Joe Rogan is just one of the most popular podcasts in the world with a majority young male audience. I hate it here. Every time this topic comes,
I feel like it's just a majority of YouTube too. I think that when there's a lot of YouTube channels in general, it's predominantly male, inherently. And her reason for not going on the Joe Rogan podcast is because he wanted Joe Rogan to be censored about certain topics, like don't talk about this, don't talk about that, don't talk. And whether that dismantled the purpose of it happening or not, why, if your goal is to be transparent in the public eye, why are you secretly telling people to not talk about things? It's not a good look. It's not a good look. And then obviously in the comparison of her rival, Donald Trump at the time, he just went on. He gunned for it. He's like, here's this opportunity, let's send it. That looks better. Now, obviously, a lot of the charges on Trump as of late have been dropped. Reasons for that happening, we all got different outcomes as to why that's happening. Neither here nor there. But man, was that a bad look.
so does the topic of like Andrew Tate, Jordan Peterson, internet algorithms, Gamergate, whatever.
There is a massive amount of right-wing radicalization that has been occurring, especially in younger male spaces. Any hobbies whatsoever, whether it's playing video games, whether it's working out, whether it's, I don't know, listening to like a history podcast or whatever, everything that they see is right-wing sentiment being expressed by individuals that they find charismatic.
But you can only...
The idea that natural inclination of competition, seeking a greater sense of self through information, knowledge, intelligence, or physical development, that doesn't make it right-wing radicalization, nor are these fears where it's being propped up as this thing to automatically choose. When people are more conscientious, they typically drive towards more conservative beliefs. What I think he meant to say is that he's not going to reach what he doesn't impress. If we have a history of poor demonstration of character, we're not going to appeal to mature audiences or audiences that are pursuing any form of maturity. Because as surprising as it is, it's not attractive to complain. It's not attractive to point fingers all the time. If anything, you look like a symbol of weakness, and you look like one of those people that's constantly drawing out the manipulation of guilt. If someone is more self-oriented and they're willing to focus on themselves, they don't care about the blame game that you're playing on whatever streaming network you're deciding to be on. And just because they don't listen to you doesn't mean that they're seeking right-wing radicalization. You're just not appealing to someone improving themselves. And you often see the case of increasing and decreasing audiences simply because when people grow up, not in a sense of age, you can have old children, trust me, but in the sense that they are growing up in a sense of morality or character, they're less likely to adhere to such concepts of blame and guilt and things that they are already confident is well outside of what they had anything to do with, outside of their responsibility. And so guilt, shame, pointing the finger, these variations of complaints is naturally going to be more inclined for people that are agreeable and people that want to be more cohesive and based on the essence of self-esteem. They're going to be drawn to these areas to see what they could feel about and be involved with, because being involved is more consistent with those that are agreeable. But people that are more purpose-driven, duty-driven, they're not worried about what everyone is thinking. They're worried about what they need to do for themselves next. And that often doesn't imply that they need to blame or complain or whatever. I think a lot of these people are just out of touch, and they either are getting paid very well or they're very, very naive and immature, and they don't see the issue of what they're doing. And they are often have essences of psychopathy, being that they have a complete and utter lack of empathy, which means they don't care or see the footprint that they're deciding to leave in the void that is other people's lives. And when you monopolize and capitalize on that essence, there's a whole lot wrong with you. And obviously you can see that in several different personalities.
Blame internet algorithms for so much for so long. This automatic assumption that any dissent from liberal mainstream thought could only be caused by manipulation or brainwashing from podcasters is honestly a—
You're just not impressive. You haven't done anything in your life that's worth listening to or worth watching, because you have nothing under your belt that people actually admire. And that's in a sense of people that want to improve themselves. And yet you got hundreds of thousands of people that are subscribed to people like Jordan Peterson or various even politicians on the left, or basically when Tulsi Gabbard was coming up on the left. You had a lot of people following her rhetoric as an example, because as a woman, she did very well for herself. And then obviously in the essence of someone like Jordan Peterson, people could relate and admire his delivery in the essence of orienting not your finger towards the world, but turning it towards you and how much power you have, and basically empowering people with the essence of what they could achieve should they look at it, right? And I think you see that all the time.
Cope, in my opinion, and just an easy excuse for failing to reach anyone beyond your own subreddit. As if this all wasn't the result of like a stagnant neoliberal corpo hell world that created a vacuum that—
Yeah, I guess it is a way of looking at it. Basically, I'm inadequate, but it's not my problem. It's not my fault. It's your fault. And naturally, that does sound like immaturity, doesn't it?
Was just waiting to be filled with any kind of populism. The crazy thing is, the Democratic Party did have a candidate who successfully spoke to the demographic that they are currently trying so hard to reach. His name was Bernie Sanders. And every time he did speak to that demographic, or say he was concerned that the Democratic Party didn't do enough to speak to that demographic, he was called a sexist, a racist, he was backstabbed multiple times, and cheated out of winning the Democratic primaries. His fans were called Bernie bros, and constantly berated as sexists and misogynists.
Yeah, because they already had Hillary Clinton slotted for the position, so they told him to stand down, and he did, unfortunately. And obviously, they turned their massive influence in the media against their own candidates. That's rough.
His campaign was too white and too male, and this apparently was a top priority to remedy in a future campaign.
They weaponized the media against their own people.
We were told he was just like Trump and, quote, appeal to angry white men. Well, who's trying to appeal to angry white men now, bitch? It's almost like Bernie's hyper-focus on working-class issues, bread-and-butter issues, and populism was naturally attractive to men. No football or beer required. I miss him. And you know what? Maybe this shift with young men has less to do with who's holding the football and more of what happens when the DNC spends all their time and energy trashing the little bit of populism in their movement. And if you ask me, handing conservatives a monopoly on anti-establishment rhetoric on a silver platter was probably their first mistake. They kind of gave up on that bread and butter New Deal stuff for identity politics, and if you deny this, you are either lying or coping. The physical manifestation of the left has gone from the vision of the blue-collar union worker to a nagging, scolding fat woman with blue hair, barging into everyone's spaces and culturally colonizing them. Change this, change that, I don't like this, I don't like that.
And why would anyone want to find anything in their likeness with that? And that's a problem? Character on the essence of entitlement. And stepping into other people's spaces and demanding conformity without demanding any essence of what you should do about you first, and no self-orientation, right? This is the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. And this is what happens when you have more of an emphasis on self-esteem than anything else that people can provide. It's a massive lack of character.
It's just incredible for me to witness years of anti-male rhetoric finally come back to bite the left and Democrats in the ass. Watching these chickens come home to roost has just been both incredibly depressing and deliciously vindicating to me in a sick way, and I'm not sure if I should lend out a helping hand or Mufasa them off this cliff. Some Democrats are nervous the party was too late to realize the problem. These Democrats worry that the party has focused too much on courting women voters, LGBTQ voters, and culturally progressive voters, alienating too many men in the process. There's a recognition that we're losing men, and the things we're doing around men haven't been working. I think a lot of it is a reaction to social progressivism done the wrong way, says David Hogg. Young men, he says, feel like progressives look down on them for saying the wrong thing, even when it's a mistake. That discomfort is enough to drive them away from the Democratic Party, even if they don't necessarily agree with Republicans. They would rather be around someone they don't agree with who doesn't judge them, than somebody they do agree with who judges them constantly. Men aren't moving right because they are choosing fascism, they are moving right because the left made them the villains in their anime fan fiction. It's not that they all like Trump, it's that they all hate you, and no amount of camo hats is going to fix that. But do not get it twisted, I do not in any way, shape, or form believe the GOP is going to help men. I don't think they're gonna help anyone. Except maybe Israel. Do I think all of the left is some hyper woke fat lady wagging her finger in men's faces like no fun allowed? No. If I did, I wouldn't call myself left-wing. I'm not a Democrat, I'm a registered independent. But the Democratic Party is historically better on policy, and despite their messaging, even when it comes to helping men. Healthcare, higher wages, paid family leave, labor protection, social security, things Republicans have always fought against. And I think that's why this is extra frustrating to me. I don't say this with any love for the Republican Party.
Because maybe the scope of democracy has shifted in the past 8 years or so, and maybe the idea of democracy isn't necessarily democracy anymore. Maybe it's kind of degrading into something else, and it doesn't stand for what democracy used to stand for. I feel like that's the kind of issue that you see nowadays too.
In fact, if anything, I say it with love for the Democratic Party. I fucking hate them, but deep down, I wish they could be better. I'm doing this for your own good. Shh. Go sleep, shh. Go sleep, I love you, go sleep, shh. I just hope that whether Kamala wins or loses, the party can take a step back and evaluate what they're doing wrong. Because I don't think the Democratic Party should be the party for the gays and women. I think the Democratic Party should be the party for everyone, including angry white men. So in your opinion, what could the Democratic Party do to win back young men? Can they do anything? Are they fucked? To me, it might take decades of work to fix the culture, the rot that infests the progressive ideology. It is going to take a lot of work to fix, but I think it's worth it, not just for the Democratic Party's sake, but just for society's sake. If you like this video, please consider donating to my Patreon, link down below. It really helps the channel out, and I appreciate it so much. Also, thank you for 2 million subscribers. That's insane. And I will see you guys with a new video soon. Bye!
So that was Shoe0nhead's video on why men are moving to the right. Now, obviously, she left that with an interesting question of how can the left resecure populations of men? How can they reach them? Right? That's obviously what we're going to arrive to. I mean, I think the first thing is that you need to stop orienting your selection of your populace based off the significance of the polls, and you start orienting policies and rhetoric and character that makes that attractive enough for that to want to be pursued. The thing is, the radicalization that currently exists in left-wing politics is far too volatile to ever inherently receive men on good faith, standing, natural, by any means. The prerequisite to being a liberal at this point in time, in consideration to the radicalization that exists, is that you have to be subservient and you have to be guilty for things that you didn't do, but just simply merely for existing, and then you're in. And then while you're in, it doesn't stop there. You're going to continue to be reminded of your place. When was that ever going to work? I think there's a lot of people that should be ashamed of themselves. There's no fix there. And the more you're tailored towards a narrative, the less you're tailored to doing the work or being the character that can reach. And at the end of the day, if we don't facilitate an orientation around authenticity and not just what sounds good, we're never going to reach it, because our push is always going to be shallow. And anytime something's shallow, it's never consistent and it's never intrinsic enough for it to continue. One of the scary things that I saw was AOC, that United States representative from, I believe, New York, who was avidly concerned or interested in what young men have listened to, subscribed to, are interested in, what have you. That got me thinking, are we just concerned about the words and how the messages sound in order to secure a vote? Are we now going to play the best actor that we can in order to obtain the vote? Why is it that we're more concerned with fooling people and not concerned with the inadequacy of our own politics? Why is it that we're always so busy shying away from the reality that we're crooked and needlessly corrupt? Now, obviously, this exists on both sides, and naturally, people are going to pick the lesser of two evils. It's never this person's a saint, that person's a saint. It's never the case. It's politics, and we know that everybody has the skeletons in their closet. Got it. However, why is it so easy for one side to reach people than the other? And how did you allow that? Well, unfortunately, you created narratives on the basis of insulting people's character. What's crazy to me, and what was consistent, was that you saw a lot of young people that were typically liberal. Now, the association between that was often the more educated you were, the more likely that you were going to be tied to liberal or Democratic Party. Okay. The less you were educated in the realm of academia and in reference to securing degrees, you were less likely to be Democratic. So the argument that was put forth by the left was that only educated people, in other words, they tied terminology like intelligence in that reference to the idea that only intelligent people vote for the right thing, when there's completely no association whatsoever with IQ and morality. You could have someone with 60 IQ be a far better person of character than someone with 140 IQ. And that's why often in a lot of themes of movies and stuff like that, and you hear Jordan Peterson speak on it very briefly about why the bad or evil character was often far more malicious and genius in his action as a character in reference to the current morality of entertainment and things like that. It's always the evil genius, right? Because what's happening a lot of the times is various forms of Luciferian intellect, in which case people who are granted the blessing of higher intelligence, and this is a bit of a hypothesis, is that they're more likely to be immoral because you're granted the power of intelligence over other people. And what Luciferian intellect typically implies is that anytime you do get into debates or you do get into the mannerisms of your existence, you're more concerned with winning and less concerned with being right, correct, because you have to deal with the consciousness of being smarter than everybody else. And what that can do is that power can corrupt. You apply that to the concept of the higher your IQ, the more you might be Democratic, or the more education you have, the more likely you will be a Democratic voter. It's a very interesting association. And I don't think there's a lot of people talking about that because they often ridicule people of lower intelligence, even though just because you're higher as with your IQ, which means you'll test better, and in a reference to what your intellectual capability is, doesn't dictate you as a good person. And it doesn't mean that you're going to make the best decision, because that's why the often outcome is to overcomplicate things. And when you use that as part of your rhetoric to explain why it's better to be one side or the other, it's just so skewed. I think in order for fairness to be delivered on both sides, we got to drive away from the image and be more in line with who we are behind the screen and behind the microphone, and find a consistency there. Because when you're transparent and when you're consistent as a human being, there's nothing for them to point to. The most they'll do is insult your appearance. Who cares? They'll insult the thing that you said. Who cares? They'll insult something about your face. Who cares? You can't touch nothing about who I am as a person, because all you're going to do is attack me, and you can't even attack my point, my stance, or my opinion. I don't know. I feel like we have to be very mindful whenever we're addressing an argument, whenever we're addressing a position of stance, because the thing that you're seeing a lot nowadays too is the necessity of arguing for the sake of arguing. And you'll find that more often in areas that have emphasis on intelligence, because That's where the Luciferian intellect kind of comes into play, where people just want to argue, just not to be morally correct, but just to win, just to belittle you and cause submissiveness without the essence of being correct, but just to see it, just to get that ego fuel from being able to diminish someone else's standing, position, what have you. And you see it a lot with these Jubilee comparisons with people obviously debating. It's no longer about valid point against valid point, like, here, this is what's wrong with this point. No, it's more about, this is what's wrong with you because I can't argue your point, and so this is what I'm going to do, and then I'm going to shift to something I'm more confident about to be able to discuss this over you because this is the only thing that I can do. I'm not going to agree on anything that you say because that's too much, and if I do so, it makes me look like the weak character, and since I'm built on ego, I can't do that. It's crazy. I think that because men are often more disagreeable, they see that more, and it's more likely for men to see that. Whereas women are typically more neurotic, and so they're more vulnerable to emotion and the influence that emotion can bring. And when you're addressing a typically disagreeable demographic, you got to be very mindful about how you go about your business, because they will watch you, they will track it, and you have your mainstream media, which is obviously 80% of media in reference to news outlets is left wing. We know this. I mean, you can name off 8 to 9 of the news networks, and then on the right side, you got on the right wing, you got Fox, and then maybe like 2 others. So you definitely have a predominant platform doing one thing over the other. Here's the thing. People don't watch the news as much anymore because the general concept is that it's fake. It's phony. It's made up on one side, on this side, whatever. So where do people go? Podcasts, YouTube, off meta media of sorts. People are sick of getting bullshitted. And when you have someone with bad character saying good things, it doesn't take away from all the other things that they can catch on the internet. The internet's incredible. We have access to everything. Can't play the face anymore. You got to have something a little more than that, something a little more consistent with that. Otherwise, it ain't going to work. With that being said, thank you to everyone for watching the video. If you like the video, like it. Subscribe like I mentioned before. If you dislike the video, then dislike it. Hopefully you never see me again. But leave a comment in the comment section down below for what you think can be done about such a movement as this, or is there anything that should be done? For those that don't know, I put out a video recently called The Family Fall Off. The link for it will be down in the description below. I kind of talk about some of the concepts involved with American attitude and culture, but I'll let you be the judge of the concepts. So thanks again, and I'll go ahead, see you next time.